morning, Good Life family, and thank you so much for joining us for today's online service. We're so thankful to have you, and we believe today is going to be an awesome time together. As you're watching this online, we also have a group of our church family that's gathering right here in this room for in-person worship. But our hope is whether it's in this room in person or if you're watching this online right as it's posted, or maybe you're catching it later, we're praying that God would still use this message, that He would still use this time together to speak to you and speak to your heart. And in light of that, we're closing out a series this morning called Relate. Over the past few weeks, if you've joined us at all, we've been looking at what the Scripture has to say about how we relate to those people that we're in our closest relationships with. And we're going to continue that today with a special message. We're looking forward to closing out this series Relate and looking ahead to the future as well. As we look ahead to that, we're also going to worship together, and I want to share with you just a couple ways that you can connect to our church family. Whether you're just traveling right now, I know it's the summer, so a lot of people are taking vacations and doing things like that. Or maybe you're just simply checking our church out for the first time, or you might just be staying home this morning. Whatever it is, we want to say you're welcome here. We're so thankful to have you. Let me share a couple ways that you can connect to our church family. The first and maybe easiest way is if you have any questions about our church, you can always visit our website, goodlifefl.com. In addition, you can always feel free to email us at info@goodlifefl.com. It's a great way to reach out with any questions you might have. In addition to that, we're also on social media, Facebook and Instagram. We're posting some things there throughout the week, are great ways to stay connected and encouraged throughout the week. And other than that, church family, we're looking forward to diving into closing out this series together, diving into worship together, and connecting to Jesus together. So with that being said, church family, let's go ahead and get started with the service, and let's begin with worship.
Casting out all fear, the hand that holds the heavens is the mighty hand that saves, the voice that calms the raging sea. It's calling me by name, I'm singing in the victory of the cross, and resting in the shadow of your redeeming love. And I'm standing in the promise of new life, for I am yours forever. Oh Jesus, you are mine. And oh Jesus, you are mine. And oh Jesus, you are mine. Oh, to you and when I have forgotten the fullness of your grace, yes, I'll remember Calvary. Oh, it's where you took my place. Yeah, I'm singing in the victory of the cross, and resting in the shadow of your redeeming love. Yeah, I'm standing on the promise of new life. For I am yours forever, and Jesus, you are mine. Oh, Jesus, you are mine. Oh, Jesus, you are mine. Oh, there is no one like you, God. And love immeasurable and strong. Oh, there is no one like you, God. Oh, so lead this heart to sing in awe. And there is no one like you, God. Oh, love immeasurable and strong. And there is no one like you, God. Oh, so lead this heart to sing in awe. Yeah, I'm singing in the victory of the cross, and resting in the shadow of your redeeming love. Yeah, I'm standing on the promise of new life. For I am yours forever. Oh Jesus, you are mine. Oh Jesus, you are mine. Oh Jesus, you are mine. For there's no one like you. Oh, there's no one like you. You're always singing on of you. And I'm singing in the victory of the cross, and resting in the shadow of your redeeming love. And I'm standing on the promise of new life. For I am yours forever. And Jesus, you are mine. Oh, Jesus, you are mine. Oh, you are mine. Oh, it's who you are. And Jesus, you are mine.
How big is your world? I asked that question during our Tuesday 128 time when we did the little video devotion that we email out to everybody. And I asked you to be thinking about that question this week. How big is your world? Because it's an answer to a question that changes during different seasons of life. Our answer to the question at 3 years old is going to be very different than our answer to the question at 103 years old. Like, from our very conception, our world is very small. Our world is our mother's womb. And even when we're born, our world is still very small. It's, confined to a crib or a little carrier or a stroller. We can't see very far, and we're scared by sounds. Our world is very small. As we start to be able to crawl and to walk, our world gets bigger. As we head off to school, our world gets even bigger. We head off to high school, and man, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they hand us a driver's license, and man, the world is ours for the taking at that point, right? We can go anywhere we want to go until you realize gas isn't free, and then you go, okay, I can go here, right? I can only go here. I remember being a kid and putting gas in my car and like getting change from the coin cup, right? And going, I can put a whole gallon in today, right? Our world gets bigger, but sometimes there are some limitations. Then you graduate and you go to college and your world gets just a little bit bigger. Then you find somebody you love and you walk down the aisle and your world gets bigger. And then one day you're holding another little life whose world is quite small and you're responsible for it. And your world in that moment gets a whole lot bigger. It's not only seasons of life, sometimes it's experiences in life. You grow up and you begin and you take your first vacation and you go to a place you've never gone before and you experience something you never experienced before. You taste new things, you see new things. The first time you're on top of a mountain looking over a valley and beholding God's creation, your world gets a little bit bigger. The first time you're standing on a shore looking out across the vast ocean and you're watching the sun set, your world gets a little bit bigger. The first time you travel outside of your country and you experience another culture and you experience a different people, your world gets a little bit bigger. And if you travel to another country for a mission trip and you experience people who are living in the depths of poverty, you're living completely apart from ever hearing the good news of Jesus, your world gets a little bit bigger. As time goes on, the world that we see, the world that we experience, our understanding of how big our world is, it changes from season to season and experience to experience. But here's the thing. Once you've seen a bigger world, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen a bigger world, that bigger world doesn't fit in your small view anymore, no matter how hard you try. And I'm glad you're here today, because my prayer for today, my goal for today is that you and I will leave this room today and the world's going to be just a little bit bigger. And we're never going to be able to unsee how big God's world really is and what that means for our lives. You see, today we're also wrapping up a series called Relate, a series that has called us to navigate our most important relationships in a way that honors God. We jumped into this series out of the book of John because we recognized that we reached a point in the book of John where Jesus has this interaction with his siblings that is entirely dysfunctional, if not destructive. And we looked at it and we said, man, if Jesus has difficulty in some of his relationships, man, we're going to have them too. The only difference between us and Jesus is often we're the source of the conflict and dysfunction in our relationships, and Jesus never was. So we spent time sort of walking through various circles, bigger and bigger circles of relationships. And we've done it with the goal of navigating our most important relationships without forgetting our ultimate purpose. Sometimes we can take our faith and have it be a Sunday thing. But that's not what Scripture's calling us to do, and it's not what Christ died for us to do. We are called to be a people who will live out our faith, live out our mission, live out our purpose in every single relationship, even and especially in those relationships that can be incredibly difficult. So we've walked through marriage relationships, romantic relationships, whether you're single, dating, engaged, or married, we've walked through that. We've walked through parent and child. We've walked through extended family, work, school, and community. We've walked through our church family. We've looked at all these various increasing distance circle of relationships and how we can live out our purpose. And we've tried to do that. And in my mind, I thought, like, man, we've covered everything. As I was planning this out, like, we've covered all the relationships. Let's keep going. Let's dive back into John, which is what we plan to do next. But as I was going through this series, and as the Lord was teaching me other things sort of parallel to this, I realized there was a big gaping hole in what we were going through. So we added a week and kicked some things back, and this is that week. As I was planning it, I really felt like we covered everything. We've been doing it from a perspective of knowing what our purpose is based on the great creeds and catechisms of our faith. That our purpose in life, that we can't forget our purpose in our most important relationships, but our purpose is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. That's been our goal. And it felt like having walked through those increasing circles of relationships that we kind of checked all the boxes. But the Lord laid on my heart, no, you haven't yet. Your scope, your world, it's still too small. You need to pull back a little bit further. I believe that tried and true statement of to glorify God and enjoy Him forever, it stood the test of time and has guided the church well through good times and bad. But I think that there's a possibility of us landing in a conclusion, looking at that purpose statement, a conclusion and a world that's way too small, and we're actually missing the reason that we're here. We're missing part of the purpose of why we were given breath and given life. A feeling has been reinforced when earlier this spring, we spent some time, several of us, a Friday evening from something like 7 to 1 in the morning, 7 at night to 1 in the morning, going through a simulcast called Secret Church with a pastor called David Platt. He was the head of the International Mission Board for a while, author, speaker, communicator, loves Jesus. He's one of those people that I can, without reservation, go, if he wrote it, read it, it's awesome, okay? David Platt, solid guy. He talked through a lot of what we're going to talk about today. And it's stuff that God was laying on my heart, and He was reinforcing that. And what I want us to see is I want us to walk through some scripture. I want us to walk through some stories to help us understand how big this world is and what our relationship is to that world. And walk out the door with our eyes being just a little bit bigger, but our understanding of our purpose being a whole lot deeper. Let's start at the very beginning. Genesis 1:1. You guys know these verses. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 1:26, then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. And then 2:7, then the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living creature. We could spend several weeks just unpacking Genesis 1 and 2. Don't have time for that today, but I want us to see everything that we see and everything we experience and every person we interact with began as God's idea. There was nothing, and then there was something, and it all came from the word of the Lord. God spoke it into existence, and he said it all was good. And at the pinnacle of his creation, out of everything that he made that has beauty, that has wonder, that communicates who he is, that gives us a glimpse of his character and his divine attributes, everything he's made does that. At the pinnacle of that, he said, I'm going to put a creature that's a lot like me. It isn't me, but that is like me, that bears my image, that can relate to me in a way that none of creation can. And that is us. He gave us his image to bear, that we are to reflect him to all of creation and to each other. But there's something special about us because in that relationship of bearing that image, it comes with a huge responsibility. That we are not our own, that we have to do what he has created us to do if we ever want to be what he created us to be, if we ever want to interact and know the one who made us. The only way is through Jesus, but the only way we're ever going to find peace and satisfaction in life is living out the purpose for which we were created. So our responsibility to the one who gave us breath, to our Creator, is to pour out our lives, living for his purpose. And we live in a distracting time and in a distracting culture that will have us chase possessions and chase advancement and chase promotions and all these things. It'll have us chase satisfaction in relationships. And maybe even as parents to our children, we'll define ourselves by how our children are doing. We'll define ourselves by what we can purchase and own and live in. But that is not why we are here. And that mentality brings so much conflict to all those relationships. But if we will remember why we exist, not only do we end up being in right relationship vertically with the one who created us, it spills into our horizontal relationships as well. So in order to keep stretching and expanding our understanding of God's purpose for us, I think we have to understand that not only did God create me in his image and us in his image, that he created not just, we're not talking about the origins of people, we've got to understand his organization of people. Jump to Acts 17. We're going to jump around a lot today. I apologize for that. It's not our normal pattern, but it serves the purpose of today's sermon. Verse 26 in Acts 17 is Paul speaking to the people in Athens. He said, and he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined and allotted periods and boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him, yet he's not actually far from each of us. So here, Paul is saying, and God is communicating through Paul, that he didn't just make individuals, he made nations. God didn't just create individual persons, he created groups of people that here in Scripture is called nations. Remember that. So why did he make them? And these verses here give us some glimpses as to the why. What's the purpose of the individuals and the nations? Well, the first thing is this, is to enjoy him. That we were created to enjoy the one who created us. Psalm 16:11 says this, you make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forever. We are creatures that are wired to chase down pleasure. And yet we try and do everything we can to find it somewhere other than the only place it can be found. We are built to enjoy him, but on his terms. Second thing, we are built to exalt him. Psalm 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God. We know that one, but catch this. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The purpose of creation is the glory of the Creator. And if we aren't exalting the one who made us, if we aren't living out that purpose of reflecting and proclaiming his glory to the world, we're not doing what we were built to do. So we are built, our purpose is to enjoy him and exalt him, but to do it in all of his glory. Psalm 96:1 says, oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the people. Guys, these are three verses with these 3 points But we could spend days walking through verses that expound each of these points. I'm putting to you that if we don't grasp this as why we are here, nothing in our horizontal lives is ever going to make any sense. Our relationships are never going to align. We are never going to live out the life we were called to live if we don't understand that we are built to enjoy him, exalt him in all of his glory. That's God's plan for his creation. So, why does my life, your life, and the lives of everybody around us, why doesn't it look perfect like that? Here's the problem. Starting from Adam and Eve and right up to this moment, the people who were built to reflect his glory, the people who were built to enjoy him and exalt him in all of his glory, they rejected the Creator, rejected his plan. Romans 3:23 puts it perfectly. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Do you hear that? Do you see the connection? That we're built to bring him glory, and yet our sin, we're falling short of living out that thing, that point, living out that life that points to him in all of his glory. All the people in all the nations have rebelled against God and rejected his purpose. Now, God has every just cause and reason, every justification to look at his creation and go, that's it. I'm going to pull a Zeus, I'm dropping lightning bolts, and I'm wiping everybody out. Our sin warrants that. And yet, in his great love, and his great grace, and his great mercy, he sends Jesus to make a way where there was no way. Jesus to die the death that we deserved, to pay the price that we could not pay, to make a way for us to be right with the one who created us. That's the good news. And then he hands that good news to us, to his people, to his children, to those who have surrendered to Christ. He hands us that message to take it not just where we are, but to the nations, to tell that good news to the world. Acts 1:8, these are going to be very familiar verses to you. Acts 1:8, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. Jesus is talking to his followers, but by proxy, he's talking to us. That baton of faith, that baton of mission and purpose has been handed generation to generation through the church, continent to continent, across the oceans and times. It has come to us, and we inherit this task of being witnesses, of telling, giving our testimony of what the Lord has done, of who he is, and all he's accomplished. To the disciples, he says, Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Those are like dots on a map with a name beside it to us. Like we know Bible stories that unfolded in some of those areas, but it doesn't mean much to us. But I think to just put a quick lid on what that means for us, it means for us to be a people who are witnesses for Jesus across the street and around the world. Across the street and around the world, that we have a responsibility, if we're living out this purpose, to be a people who are telling not only our neighbors, but the world about Jesus. Matthew 28:19, this is this other part of the Great Commission. It says, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. With his parting shot, with his final words to his followers before he ascended to heaven, Jesus takes his heart for the nations and he infects the heart of his followers with a love for them, with a burden for them, with a desire for all of creation to hear of the glory of God and for them to come to salvation. He has a heart for the nations. That Great Commission is marching orders for us, but it's also meant to mark our lives, to imprint upon us the same broken heart for lostness that God has, the same broken heart for sin and the consequences of sin that God has, and the same drive, the same love, the same motivation that prompted God the Father to send God the Son to die in our place. That's supposed to be in us, to motivate us to not sit on the sidelines of the faith, only hearing about what other people do, but to be a part of making the good news known. So taking all that in, we had said over this series that our purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. I don't question the statement. What I question is our capacity to understand the depths and the richness of that statement. So in order to help us understand more of who we are, David Platt puts it this way, that our ultimate purpose, the ultimate purpose of God, is to bring people from all nations to enjoy and exalt him in all of his glory. God's ultimate purpose is not so me-focused. Sometimes our world is really small. Sometimes I'm this person, and sometimes you experience these people. But I'm sure I'm not alone in this, that sometimes our world can be about this big, right? That our world and the things that are important, it doesn't go 6 inches from our nose. But that is not what Jesus died. That is not the life that Jesus died to secure. We are to be a people who have our hearts and our minds and our lives poured out to reach our neighbors, but also the nations. To reach across the street and around the world to make that purpose a reality. In Acts 17, we saw the word nations. In Matthew 28, we saw the word nations. And when we hear that, we think of a globe with lines on it. We think of a map with lines on it. We think of flags, and we think of leaders, and we think of the United Nations, and we think of geopolitical entities. But that's not the word that's being communicated here. In the Greek, it is the word ethne. And what it actually means is not like countries. What it means is people groups. What it means is unique pockets of culture that may not know boundaries. Sometimes a unique people group might live across boundaries. So it's not just about nations as we see it. It's about people groups. And in the world, there are almost 8 billion people on the planet. And those people are divided into nations from a biblical perspective, not countries, but people groups. And there's about 17,000 of them. 17,000 different people groups that are here on our world right now. And some of them live right here in our community. Some of them live in places we've never seen and never been to. We probably couldn't find on a map. But they're all a part of a people group and all a part of the nations that we're called to reach. That call to go to make disciples, it applies to you and it applies to me with the people that God places in our path. That's why we spent time talking about those people. Our romantic relationships, parent and children, in our home, in our extended family, in our work, in our school, in our community. We talked about church family, what it looks like to live out our relationships in all of those areas. But if that's where we stop, then we're missing out. The Great Commission is not a general command for us just to share the good news with as many people as possible. If that's where we stop, we've missed part of the point. Should we be doing that? Yes. Please don't walk away going, Kel said I don't tell people about Jesus. No, that's not what I said. Okay, please don't walk away saying that, right? What I'm saying is this is not just a general command for us just to keep sharing the good news as much as possible. If that's all we do, we have missed part of the plan. The Great Commission is a specific command to make disciples of all nations. Did every disciple who was on that mountain with Jesus, did every single one of them end up reaching out to another nation? Many of them did. Some of them didn't even make it out. Some of them died in the city before they ever had a chance to. But they were all handed the baton of faith to not just reach the people in their city and in their surrounding region and in their surrounding country, but to reach the nations. So what do we do with that? If living out our God-given purpose stops at our circle of friends and family, our world is too small. Our world is too small. There are no borders and there are no boundaries to our responsibility, your responsibility, and my responsibility. If we are followers of Jesus, there is no borders, boundaries, or off-ramps for us to reach the nations with the good news. Individually, every follower of Jesus is called to relate to the entire world in regard to this glorious calling, this glorious burden, this glorious responsibility of the Great Commission. Across the street in our community, there's 500,000 people in our two-county area who are not connected to a local church. We need to be a people who are living what we say, loving enough to share the good news, to share our lives as well, to reach those people. If we're not doing that, we aren't accomplishing our mission. We are also to be a people who reach out around the world, not just across the street, but around the world. There are billions of people in every country who don't know Jesus. That's why like-minded churches like Good Life, people like Good Life, and like-minded churches like Good Life, we reach out and share the good news with partnering missionaries. Why we bring missionaries and we send them out to reach those people groups, to have access to the gospel. We should send missionaries to those nations. But what we end up doing as a people is sending people, as a church, we send people to reached nations. What I mean by reached nations is this. It doesn't mean that everybody there is Christians. That's not true here, and it's not true anywhere else. What it means by reached nations is this, is that they have a church there, that there are believers on the ground there who can reach, who are capable, who have the resources that they need to reach their nations. That doesn't mean we shouldn't send missionaries to reach people groups, because we should send them to come alongside local churches that are there, to come alongside the believers that are there, to help them make the good news known to their neighbors, and to help them become a people who are sending out people to the nations as well. But there is a big problem that has come from the way we've done missions, and not just Good Life. I'm talking about the Big C Church, in particular the American church. The problem Platt calls the great imbalance. Here's the problem. There are over 3 billion people in over 7,000 people groups who are unreached by the gospel. Catch that right now. 3 billion people in 7,000 people groups who are unreached with the gospel. That means there is no church presence, there is no Christian presence there that can reach those people groups, that can go and share the good news with them. And most of those 3 billion people have never heard the story of Jesus and the good news of the gospel. So here's the big problem. Churches send approximately 400,000 missionaries out into the world every year. Now, maybe total. Only 3% of them are sent to unreached people groups. Do you see that? 3 billion people who don't know the good news, 7,000 people groups who have not been reached with the gospel, and we send approximately 400,000 people out into the world as missionaries, but only 3% of them are going to unreached peoples. That's a problem, isn't it? I was blown away by that stat, blown away by it. Here's another one. Christians and churches give approximately $47 billion to missions, but only 1% of that giving goes to reaching the unreached people. 3%, 1%. Platt calls that the great imbalance. And I think it's true. We need to be a people who are sending out people to the world. But we can't forget about the unreached people. Why are they unreached? Because it's not easy to get to them. They're unreached because it's not safe to go there. They're unreached because their country's closed to the gospel, because you may have to risk your life to share the good news of Jesus there. But they need to be reached. And I'm at the point where the Lord has my world's gotten a little bit bigger, and I can't make it any smaller. And now I'm passing it off to you too. And I want to do it in such a way where we don't miss an opportunity to have this not be theoretical, but have this be very practical. Jesse, will you join me on stage? Jesse and his family, part of our church family, but Jesse also spent 12 years as a missionary in Siberia, reaching an unreached people group. So, how you doing, brother?
Doing good.
Thanks for being up here.
Yeah.
Jesse spent time doing exactly what we're talking about today. So instead of me telling you theoretically what it's like, I want us to spend time hearing exactly what it's like. So we can know how to pray, we can know what God is doing, we can know why it's important for us to pray and to send and to give and all those things. Does that sound good? All right, Jesse, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you and your family came to a point where you knew God was calling you to missions, but in particular to unreached people group, and in particular the group that God called you to reach.
Yeah, so it's a long story. I'll try to do the short version of it here. I didn't have a moment where there was a special calling on my life. People talk about that a lot. Actually, really, the moment came from just reading God's Word and reading some of the things that you've been talking about here. And when you start to recognize what an unreached people group is and what it means in a real sense, that there are people that are dying and going to hell who will never have a chance to hear the gospel in their own language, you start to feel very like, wow, that's so unfair. It's so personally offensive to me that I could sit here in my comfortable life and not care that there are people that are going to go to hell for all of eternity without doing anything about it. And so I think for both myself and my wife, we kind of individually had come to this conclusion that, okay, whatever my life is, it's going to be about this. It's going to be about taking the gospel to people who have never heard. And so we began looking into different mission agencies and things. That went back to when we were in college. We started preparing to graduate college without debt. We started, my wife took medical training. I took business training. We were very intentional about where our lives were going and what it meant, so that one day we could take the gospel to an unreached people group. And then when we were actually in the training, learning about how to learn a different language and how to start a business in a closed country and how to start a church among a people that really were strongly opposed to it, all those kinds of things that you have to be trained in, the missionary leaders would actually come from these different countries. And I remember sitting there, and the leader came from Mozambique, and he's like, we got this people group, and they're out in this valley, and no one's ever told them the gospel, and will you go? And we would pray. Like, no, we don't feel like the Lord's leading us to that one. And so then a guy came from Indonesia, and he's like, there's a people group up here and they've written us this letter. When is somebody going to come tell us God's talk? We're wanting to hear it. And we were like, maybe that's it. And we prayed and just, nope, that wasn't it either. And then somebody came from Siberia and talked to us about planning a church among a people group there in Siberia, and how there was another people group across the mountain range. And we prayed, and it was just like very clearly the Lord was saying, that's where I want you to go.
Wow. I think the Lord would have to tell you that, right? I think it has to be clearly that. What were some of the, like, when you think about, you're walking into a group of people, you don't know the language, you know some about the culture, but you don't know the culture till you're there probably. What were some of the objectives that you had coming into that? Like, what are the things you want to accomplish? But then what obstacles did you hit along the way?
Sure. So the objective is really to plant a mature church.
Okay.
And we say specifically mature church because there are a lot of organizations, a lot of the reasons why these 7,000 people groups remain unreached is because it's very, very difficult to reach them, as you said. You made a point of that. And I don't think people get a sense of how difficult that is. We're talking about at least a 10-year job. You have to have someone that's going to go and going to learn the main language of the country. So in our case, we had to go and learn Russian. And then they're going to move to another place, which is really, really difficult to get to and hard to explain to the government why you want to live out in this remote area with this tribe of people. And then you have to learn their language and culture. So just language learning alone took us almost 6 years between those two languages, because you have to learn it to a very high level. And so there's a lot of organizations that are saying, well, that's too much of an investment. That's really difficult. And so let's find a quick way. But the quick ways don't lead to a church that is going to stand the test of time. It doesn't lead to a mature church. So that was our objective going in. It was, how do we take that name off the board? You know, you said 7,000 unreached people groups. I remember when I was in college going to Urbana Missions Conference, and they talked about 6,700 unreached people groups. And now we talk about more or less 6,700 unreached people groups. And that was 20 years ago. And there are thousands of missionaries that have been sent out since then. So why are those names not coming off the board? They're not coming off the board because the people groups that are left are the hard ones. The easy ones are all long since reached. These are the people groups that take an extreme amount of work, and they take the whole church working together. And church, I don't know how I can emphasize that enough. The remaining people groups will not be reached by one or two determined families. They will have to be reached by the whole church. We had to have business consultants that came alongside us. We had to have language and culture consultants that came alongside us when we were doing Bible translation. We needed consultants from them. The whole church has to get involved. We had to have people giving us money. We had to have people praying for us. All the church has to be involved in order to see the remaining unreached people groups reached for the gospel.
When people supported you, what role did they play in it? Not only people coming alongside and like teaching, but like somebody who you're like, I'm not a language person and I'm not a business expert, but God's stirring my heart to be a part of reaching the nations and having them exalt and enjoy God in all of his glory. What role do supporters play in your life as you guys were on the field?
Absolutely huge. Obviously, financially, we couldn't have been there without people that were donating to us to allow us to remain there. But I think an underemphasized one is prayer. There was a point when we had been on the field for about a year in the specific people group in Tuva, in Siberia. So we had been in Russia for about 3 years at this point, and we were experiencing a lot of sickness. I don't know if you guys know very much about Siberia, but it's a very difficult place to live. It's very, very cold. Obviously, that's what it's famous for. But it's not just the cold. It's an extremely, they heat everything with coal, and so we had a lot of coal dust in our lungs that were causing us asthma and all kinds of problems. And I remember that first year in that remote area, I was sick at least half the time. And my kids were sick all the time, and my wife was half sick and having to take care of the rest of us being sick. And she was so discouraged when we came back to the U.S. For a brief respite that she actually was praying, Lord, I can't go back. I can't go back. And so she sat down with some ladies from the church, and she poured out her heart, and she said, I cannot do this in my own strength. I can't. And she asked these 4 ladies to commit to praying for her regularly. And when we were on our flight back, we flew into Moscow, and we had an overnight stay there, and then we were going to keep flying on. And she woke up because of jet lag and was sitting there in the living room, and she told me this much later, which would have freaked me out if I had known at the time. But she said she was praying before the Lord, and she said, Lord, if you don't give me a heart for these people before Jesse wakes up, then I'm going to tell him I'm going back to the U.S. I'm not going back there. I can't do it. And she's convinced that it was because of these prayer of these four ladies that even as she said that, her heart broke for the T people. For the people that we had met, because we had been on the ground for about a year at this point, and we didn't speak the language well enough to share the gospel with them yet, but we did know how lost they were. We did know how broken their lives were. And she immediately, as soon as she said those words, was broken and fell to her knees weeping with a desire to see the T people reached with the gospel of God. And so that is what kept us there, was people praying.
Praise the Lord. What did the Lord accomplish during your time in Siberia? You were there 12 years.
Yeah.
Tell me, and it's hard to put in a nutshell, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But
It's almost hard to put into words, first of all, the challenges that we went through. We had some extreme health issues. We had a son that aged 9 attempted suicide. I was questioned by authorities many, many times, very difficult ways. But we were able to see a church planted among the T people for the first time. If you were to go there today, you would be able to meet a church that meets regularly on Sundays with elders, that has already planted a daughter church and is beginning to talk about sending their own first missionary to a neighboring people group on the other side of Mountain Valley. And it is one of the great privileges of my life to be able to say that to you today. It's really hard to express, and our church was able to come along for the ride. Not only, this was our sending church from North Carolina, our church was able to see how that happened, all the way from when we arrived and the situation was so difficult. And at one point, I remember we had been in that area for about 6 or 7 years. And I told my wife, I said, we will never see a church here. And that's okay, because we don't measure success by results, right? That's how we have to be as a people of God. We cannot measure results by what kind of numbers we ended up reaching, because that's all in the hands of God. We measure success by faithfulness. And so I said to her, we'll be here 40 years or 50 years, and we'll never see a church, and that's okay. We have to decide together as a family that that's okay, that we're ready to commit to that. And it was around that time, I think we had been on the field for about 7.5 years when we had our first believers, and it really snowballed so quickly from there to, we had 2, we had 7, we had 50, and we had 150, and we had elders, and we were starting to talk about leaving. So
beautiful. And all that, not only are you guys experiencing God's faithfulness and provision and while you're there, but everyone who was a part of sending you and praying for you, they're getting to vicariously see God work and be a part of that.
And I think
purpose.
you said it well. You said it's about expanding our world a little bit. And I think that enabled our sending church to expand their world, to see, oh, God is bigger than just our little community here. Our God is a God of all the nations, of Panta Ta Ethne, right? That's the Great Commission, is to go and make disciples of all the nations. And Revelation 5 tells us that by your blood, you have ransomed people from every tribe and tongue and language. So we know that Jesus cares about all these nations. We know that he has already ransomed them with his blood. So it's a question of finding them and proclaiming the gospel to them so that we can see them brought in, so that one day in Revelation 7, we'll be standing before the throne with all those people. And I look so much forward to introducing you guys to, our brothers and sisters from the T people. And just the joy that will be for me, for those of you guys that have supported us and prayed for them. And I know even like last year, we had a situation where a young girl came to know the Lord and was totally rejected by her family, and even her life was threatened. And you guys were praying for her and lifting her up. And I just can't wait to introduce you guys, because I feel like I get to be experiencing a lot of the joy of interacting with those people and then just telling you guys about it. So you have to live vicariously, like you said. But I can't wait until you can meet them in person and just really enjoy that yourselves.
What's going on in that church today that excites you?
Yeah, so actually the elders just wrote me 2 days ago and said that the daughter church that they're planted is going really well. They've grown to about 16 people, I think they said. And they are working their way through the Bible chronologically with them. The elders are going over and teaching at that daughter church. And they just taught on the tabernacle and were sharing about how that was going. And it's just real encouragement. Also, one of the elders, many of you guys prayed for him. His name starts with a CH. One of the elders that had been really discouraged, I had a call with him yesterday, and he was sharing that he was doing much better and feeling much more encouraged, and had prayer requests that weren't just all about his own discouragement, but different things that are going on in his life. So yeah, it's just a neat time to see the church continue to grow there.
That's fantastic. So you guys are home in the States now. You're working with GSI, Global Serves International. Serve International. Tell us about what that organization does, what you do with them,
Sure.
and how that organization helps churches like ours live out our Great Commission purpose.
Sure. So GSI is an organization that, actually John Piper does a thing where he explains kind of the dual roles of missionaries, or the dual potential roles for missionaries, and he breaks them into two categories, Paul's and Timothy's. So if you remember, at one point Paul says that I have fulfilled the gospel in Romans 15, all the way from Jerusalem to Illyricum. And if you were living at that time, you probably would have looked at Paul like, you're crazy, because there's like 1% of the population is believers or less. And like, what are you talking about? You've fulfilled the ministry of the gospel. You're going on to Spain. But he sends Timothy back to those areas, and he says, do the work of an evangelist. And he sends him to Ephesus and tells him to make sure there's no false teaching. So there's still a role for somebody in a place where a church has been planted. For a missionary that comes cross-culturally and works within an existing church to continue to strengthen, encourage, fulfill things that are lacking in that church. Then there's a separate category of missionary who's like Paul is saying, I want to go to the places where there are no churches at all. I want to go to Spain because I'm done over here. And so GSI is an organization specifically for that second category, for the Paul category. We go only to places where there are no existing churches and to the people groups where there are no churches among them. And almost all GSI missionaries will learn 2 languages and proclaim the gospel for at least 12, 15 years before we see churches planted on average. So we come alongside the local church. Our goal is we are very, very strongly, one of our strong values is to partner with the local church so that the church herself can be the sender, can be active in sending, and then we can come alongside and sort of help the church understand the task and help the church to accomplish the task. Because of some of the things you described, like the technical, how are we going to translate the Bible? What do we do about this grammatical feature? Those kinds of things where it's difficult for a church to have input, but then not taking away the church's role as the authority as a sender.
Now, if there's somebody here today, or maybe somebody joining us online, who is feeling a stirring in their heart, you didn't have a moment where it happened, the Lord worked over a long period of time, but maybe they're feeling either that moment or that process, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say that, first of all, you need to confirm that with the leadership of the church, whether it be this church or if they're looking online and they come from a different church, that the first thing that they need to say is, not everybody is cut out for this line of work. So you need to go and talk to the church leadership and to sort of confirm that they are in agreement that you're called to that. And that you're suited for that kind of work. Or if not, what can you do to develop yourself? Because as I talked about briefly in our story, like we needed a lot of training, theological, business, medical, before we could go. And so sometimes that can be helpful, and we can work through that with you. But yeah, there's quite a bit of preparation that has to be done before you're ready to go. So I would hardly recommend the ministry of Radius International. If any of you guys know Radius International, they do missionary training. It's absolutely the most effective, in my opinion, in the world today for specifically this kind of Pauline ministry type model. I would suggest that you start there.
Add to that, I think, that if somebody's sitting there, that just to remember, like our American mentality is, I'm going to prepare myself to do something and then I'm going to go do it. Right? It's just very, I'm going to go get the training, I'm going to go get the certificate, and then I'll say yes to it, right? But in missions, it's God doesn't call the prepared, He prepares the called, right? And I think if we could get our mentality of putting our yes on the table before we're ever ready to go, it would change a lot of how we see things. Let me ask one other question that I didn't plan to ask you. You haven't mentioned exactly where you went, and you haven't mentioned exactly who you reached. Briefly and safely, why don't you do that? I want us to understand that.
So GSI works exclusively in closed countries. So the country that we worked in is not open for missionaries. You cannot go to the government and say, I would like to get a missionary visa, and then get that visa and then go do your ministry. And so we had to go in sort of as tent makers is the way that typically that's been referred to. And so we had a business. I had a large factory that I ran and managed, and that was a big part of us being there and developing relationships within that community. But because it's illegal to sort of do missionary work when you're not on a missionary visa, You have to be very careful about how we talk about this, especially publicly and things that are going online, because of the other country's ability to search that out and find it. So that's why we've been careful not to use my last name or the location where we worked.
So I'm going to keep him up here because he's going to speak into something here in a second. But guys, just to put a bow on this, I hope in hearing this, from hearing from God's word and then hearing the story, you can go, man, the world's a little bit bigger. It's that view from the top of the mountain. It's that view from the shore, and I can't unsee what I've seen. I can't unhear what I have heard. I hope our world has gotten a little bit bigger. And what I hope you walk away with today is that we are called through the Great Commission to have a relationship with every person on the planet. Like that's the Great Commission. And man, like part of me hears that and I go, Kel, could you just not have said that? That sounds hard. That sounds difficult. That sounds like something that could mess up my carefully constructed life. And you know what? Yeah, it can. And I'm okay with that. I want us to be okay with that. I want us to be a people who see this great, big, great commission, and our eyes don't just get bigger to see the world. Our heart gets bigger to break for those who are lost in the world, who have never heard about it. David Platt puts it this way. He says, to be a disciple of Jesus is to let his ultimate purpose in the world dictate everything you think, desire, and do. We don't have any plans. We should not have any plans that don't align with living out our purpose in life. Every relationship that we have ought to be focused around being who God has called us to be. Every interaction we have locally ought to have a global mindset to it and a Great Commission mindset to it. That we want to be a people, whether we're at work, school, church, or in our prayer closet, spending time before the Lord, spending time over our checkbook and how we're going to give, and spending time before God saying, God, help me know. I want to put my yes on the table to anything you want me to do. And until you say no, my yes sits there. Man, to be a people who do that, that would be life-changing for us and community-changing for Bradenton and Sarasota and world-changing. We're supposed to be a part of that. So let me give you 3 practical things you can do. First thing is this: pray differently. Pray differently. Pray with this bigger world in mind. Pray differently. There's an easy way you can do this. One of the great things technology's allowed us to do is make the world a little bit more reachable. And so the Joshua Project has an Unreached Group of the Day app. There's literally an app for that, right? Where you can go on there and every day see an unreached people group. It's not going to be a nation necessarily. It's going to be a people group. And that's a beautiful thing for you to be able to do. And do it confidently and in a way where you know God is going to accomplish his purpose. Let's let our prayers work on our hearts to be a part of accomplishing his purpose. And we already have a couple of couples who are out from our church reaching out. And again, because of what Jesse said, we have to be careful about how we say it. We have Andy and Becca, and also Austin and Kim, who are all reaching Southeast Asia. They're in different countries in Southeast Asia, but we are supporting one of them, prayerfully planning to support another one in the coming year. As the elders of the church, we are praying through what it looks like to not only have what we talk about, but how we spend the resources that we have, how we can do that in a way where we are living out the Great Commission. So first, pray differently. Second, give differently. Wisely, generously, cheerfully, sacrificially. We want to be a people who are focused on the nations, reached and unreached, sending people alongside existing churches and sending people and being a part of praying and supporting and sending people, and maybe some of us being going people who are going to places where they've never heard the word at all. And then third, go differently. Live out your purpose right where you live, across the street, but also live out your purpose in terms of reaching the nations as well. There's short-term trips you can do that I pray when we do those, we're working toward that as a church, where it won't be missionary tourism, right? But it'll be coming alongside the church there and making a difference. There's midterm you can do from 1 month to 2 years, and then long-term is 2 years or more. I just want to put to us, and this is something that I don't want us to miss, that when it comes to living out our Great Commission purpose, we're doing one of 3 things. We're either going, we're sending, or we're disobeying. When it comes to living this out, that's the only 3 categories that we have. We're saying, yes, I'm going, and we go. We're being a part of sending those who are going, or, just put it bluntly, we are looking at God's great purpose and going, thanks, but no thanks. And I want to give you one real practical way you can do that. And Jesse, I'd like for you to speak into this. One really attainable step you can do to grasp this bigger world is be a part of the Engage Global Mission Workshop. We're taking a trip bringing a group of people from our church to Minneapolis on October 15 through 17 of this year. We'll be going up there for a weekend. That's a Friday through a Sunday, so you'd only have to miss one day of work in order to be there. It's $225 plus airfare. We're going to have a brief meeting right after this service and then also right after the second service, right down here up front, to talk through a few things, to get your information from you, to maybe answer some of your questions and tell you what the timeline is going to be to do that. But Jesse, you know a little bit about this organization. Tell these people, tell me why we should go to something like this.
You should go like something like this because even if you're not going to go yourself, as you just said, you can either go, you can send, or you can disobey. And if you're sitting there thinking, the only contribution I've ever made to the Great Commission is, hopefully some of my donations that I give to the church are somehow filtered down to a missionary, and that's it, then I just want to say, from my perspective, you're actually disobeying. You're not being an active part of what God is calling you to do and what He's made you to do. Your purpose on this earth is to expand His glory across the entire globe. And it is such a privilege that you're missing out on. Engage Global is an organization that will help you to understand, whether you are 70 or 17, how you can be a part of what God is doing around the world. And that's the best way I can think of to put it. They are going to take you, they're going to educate you on what is God doing in the world, what are different ways that you can be a part of it, and get you fired up and give you some practical experience of going to different cultures. They live in a very multicultural city there, so they can actually take you to a couple of different cultures to observe and see what cross-cultural communication is like in a practical way. And I just cannot recommend it highly enough. I have seen people that I have personally talked to for like 5 years about missions, and then they go on to Engage Global and they come back and they start telling me, Jesse, do you know, I get fired up about what God is doing around the world and how I can be a part of it. And I'm like, I thought we had covered this like dozens of times. So I don't know what Rick does. It's like his secret sauce that he somehow pours, but he will get you excited about what God is doing and how you can be a part of it.
Fantastic. Guys, I want you to hear from me. I'm going on this, and I'm inviting you to be a part of it. We can't take 100 people, but we have spots that are reserved and ready to go, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. But above all, I want you to honestly look before God right now on this day and say, God, am I going, sending, or am I disobeying? Where am I in midst of understanding my Great Commission purpose? We exist as a people to love enough to share the good news and share our lives as well. And that's meant to be across the street, but also around the world. Are we going, sending, or are we disobeying? Thank you, Jesse, for doing this. Let's pray.
Hey, church family, thank you so much one last time for joining us for today's online service. We're so thankful to have you here. And whether it's these online services or our gatherings that are happening on Sunday mornings in person at 9:30 and 11, we just pray that as a people, we would continue to live out the mission of Good Life Church, to be a people who love enough to share in the good news of Jesus and share our lives together as well. If you are watching online, we're so thankful to have you, but I do want to invite you and just say that we'd always love to have you come join us in person at 9:30 and 11 right in this very room. But either way, we pray that we continue to connect with one another. If you are looking for some other ways to connect with our church family, you can always email us at info@goodlifefl.com or visit our website, goodlifefl.com. In addition to that, you can connect with us through social media, Facebook, as well as Instagram. And for anything else that you have, questions about following Jesus, questions about the message today, we'd love to follow up with that with you. So just shoot us an email, info@goodlifefl.com, and we'd love to follow up with you there. Other than that, church family, as we head out from here today, we get the chance to go out into our community this next week, wherever you may be, and continue to live out that mission, to love enough to share in the good news of Jesus in our lives as well. And until next week, let's go be a people who live on mission, and we'll see you right back here next Sunday, 9:30 and 11 in person, as well as 11 o'clock online. We'll see you guys soon.